Hello, I am Rebecca Dodd, managing editor of the GitLab blog, and joining me is my colleague Chrissy.
Yes, and I'm Chrissy Buchanan. I am a content marketer.
And we are gathered here today to demo some of GitLab's interactive review features. This is something that we do a lot when we're working on the blog and reviewing blog posts before they go live. But you could also use some of these features for reviewing merge requests for changes to the handbook or the marketing site in general. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to look at a blog post that Chrissy just submitted to me, and we'll go from there. I think this is the right window. Chrissy, can you give me a thumbs up if you're seeing this serverless blog post? Okay, great. So this is an issue for Chrissy's blog post, which she has assigned to me. And you can see here we have already had some kind of interaction about scheduling. And at the point where she assigned it over to me, said it's ready for your review. And something that's quite handy if you're new to issues, you can see there's all of the kind of history of the interaction is over here. But what I'm looking for here is, here's the merge request for the blog post. So you can see here it says related merge requests. Chrissy's created a link between the two, which means that when a merge request is accepted, the issue is closed automatically. So if I click on there, it will take me to the merge request. And you can see up front here, it's got WIP in front of it. This means it's a work in progress. And this is basically just to indicate that it's not ready to be merged yet. So the first thing that I do when a merge request is assigned over to me, I check out the review app. This is really handy. It shows you a kind of live preview of what the whatever it is that you're adding to the website or the blog, what that will look like when it's actually in layout. So I usually click that and read over the post or check if there are any kind of really obvious things up front that need to be addressed. But right away, you can see, so something like this, like if there's a video embedded, occasionally you'll be able to see straight away if like there's something wrong with the embed code and it's not rendering. But just on face value, this all looks pretty good to me. But we will do a kind of more in-depth review in a second, and I will show some of the other like review features that we use at GitLab. So the other place where you can look at what's being introduced by this merge request is if you scroll down and go over to the Changes tab. This is where the blog post file lives, and if you're new to some of this markdown formatting, may be a little bit unfamiliar to you. If you're new to GitLab, none of that's super important right now. But basically, all blog posts start with this sort of front matter, which is kind of, what's the best way to describe this? It's basically just like a lot of metadata that sort of tells the website how to render the blog. And this is where you add, like, you can see some of it's pretty obvious. So the title is there. You've got your author. If it's a GitLabber, usually it is a GitLabber writing this, their GitLab handle, and a bunch of other kind of metadata there. So the first thing, I think I'm just going to dive in and start reading this and see if there's anything that I would want to change up front. And then we can go from there. So just give me, we can probably edit out some if this takes a long time. I've told you to put some like typos in here or something. Here's something small that would be a good example of using the suggested changes feature. So one of the reasons why I like to review in this view on the Changes tab is you can see if you hover over a paragraph or a line, this little icon pops up here where you can either leave a comment or suggest a change. Both of those I find really useful if it's not something that you would just go in and change yourself, but to have some like back and forth with the writer, or if you're not sure what something means. So here I have a kind of like a knee-jerk reaction in that I think the word utilize is just the word use kind of being dressed up a bit, and I usually like change that myself. So what I would do is just click on here. You can either type a comment and just say, it's good to mention the person who you're working with so that they definitely get a notification for this. So I could either say, You can either do that, submit the comment, but what I'm going to do rather is just to show you the suggested changes feature, which is really handy for tiny things like this, or if you're not sure if something's a typo or something. Clicking on this icon here, insert suggestion, it creates like a little copy of this paragraph, and all I do is change it to what I want it to be. And you say, go add comment now, it shows the difference between the two. So you can see here, easy to utilize, easy to use. And I can even, if I want to explain further what I mean, just say, I just prefer use as it's less formal. And you can see there's this little box here that says resolve thread. We're not going to do that yet because I want Chrissy to respond to me on here, but I'll show you how to do that in a minute. So I'm just going to add that comment now. I think what some other things. If you have a lot of changes that you want to suggest, something that's really useful to use is the review feature. So instead of leaving like a string of comments and each one of them creating a new notification for whoever you are collaborating on this with, it kind of batches them all together. So I'm just going to create, Chrissy submitted to me a very well put together merge request here, so I don't have tons of feedback for her, but I'll suggest here, maybe I'm going to add a suggestion here. So I clicked on this line. This is the front matter element that tells you like what the image of the blog is going to look like. So that's this cover image up here. I think maybe because this isn't a GitLab product focused blog, I would maybe choose a stock image for this rather, just because yeah, we're not talking about specifically like GitLab branded things. This is a higher level kind of discussion about some concepts that aren't specific to GitLab. So I'm going to leave this suggestion for her. And once again, I'm going to mention her to make sure she gets this, because some people have their notifications set so that they don't get notifications unless you at them. So that's something that's good to remember. I'm just going to say, could you choose a stock image rather? This isn't a GitLab focused story. And then if I have a sense that I'm probably going to leave quite a few comments, you can, instead of going add comment now, which I did earlier, just go start a review. And then you can see this is kind of a pending comment. I can go through and add a whole bunch of other pending comments and then batch them all together at the end. So something else that I might point out, here's like a particular bugbear of mine, because one of our values is diversity and inclusion. Something that I'm often looking out for when I'm reviewing blog posts is what words we're using for the hyperlink text, because someone using a screen reader, it's really helpful for them to like know what they're clicking through to. So an annual growth rate of over 700% isn't really telling you much about what that link's going to take you to, because it's not saying, you know, what has an annual growth rate. So a suggestion that I might make here as well is to just change where that link starts. So it basically, this is like a self-contained little nugget of information. So that's another suggestion that I would add. So I'm going to add that to the review. And then, yeah, I think that's probably shown kind of all of the things that you might want to know about upfront when you're embarking on a review. So if you had more comments, you can continue adding them just as I did now. Type something in, click on add to review. I'm going to go ahead and finish this review. And it shows you like a little reminder of all of the things that you included in your review. So if you can't remember if you got to something or not, you can check that out here. And then just go submit review. And then at that point, I'm going to hand this back over to Chrissy to resolve or address some of these things that I've mentioned. So if you go back to the discussion tab, you can see it's added all of these comments that I had. So I'm going very fast. Now if I go down to the bottom here, a really easy way to assign this over instead of using the dialog box over here is just to use, I think these are called quick actions. So I just type in reassign, because what you find often happens is if you use this box, I'll add Chrissy, but then I'm still an assignee because you can have more than one assignee. So this immediately just removes me and adds Chrissy. So I'm going to assign that to her, and I usually will leave a comment as well and just say, and then comment that. And if you refresh, you'll see that it's now assigned over to Chrissy. And something else, depending on your workflow, this may or may not be relevant, but we have these scope labels for the blog post review process. So that means that anyone that has these kind of 2 double colons, if it's got the same word in the front of it, so anything that's blog : : suggests that that's part of one sort of workflow. I'm going to change that to, we've got another one, which is waiting for author. And you'll see when I do that, it immediately removes the other one and adds this one instead. So this is handy for us because we've got an issue board that covers all of the blog kind of life cycle. Yeah, you may have different versions of that in your own workflow. I don't know what's going on over here. Yeah, I'm going to hand it over to Chrissy now to talk through how she addresses feedback. And it's probably easiest if I stop sharing my screen and you share yours now, Chrissy, I guess. You're muted.
I am muted because I was trying to be respectful. But yeah, I can go ahead and show my screen.
Okay.
So can you see this merge request? Perfect. All right, so I refreshed the page. And usually how I'll handle these is I'll just do a quick scan of any changes that came through. Well, it didn't update for me. Okay, there I am. All right, so what I'll do is I'll do a quick scan of just some of the changes that were made and just take a look at the scope of these comments. And I love this feature, by the way, because then it's just easy. Applying the suggestion, especially if it's something really small, I just pretty much every time just hit that. And then, okay, perfect. So I'll go ahead and do this apply suggestion. Okay, and Rebecca, tell me this. So if I have other changes to make, this will have already been applied, correct? Okay.
Yes.
So, so when I go into edit, this change will already be there. And so here was one thing that I wanted to add in. This little bit right here underneath the video. So usually from here, I'll go to this part and just hit edit. And so under here, and is that enough spacing? Okay.
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, so for Unsplash, I have an image I kind of already had in mind. And so future, there you are. So from here, I'm like, oh, this would be a great post on serverless. Download. And then Wait, hold on. Let me make sure I share it properly. I meant to keep that. Okay, so. And Rebecca, do you want me to show this process of just resizing or?
I don't think this is super important for the purpose. I didn't think about that when I was like, oh, you should change the picture. Really, it's more just like wanting to show the sort of back and forth.
Perfect.
I think like responding to some of the comments might be helpful so that people see how threads work, and then like resolving threads and that kind of stuff.
Perfect. So
we'll shelve this one for now.
So yeah, so I'm working on the cover image. I'll resize it. I'll add it to the merge request, and then I'll commit these changes just for posterity.
Just for posterity as well, I should say best practice would be to change your commit message just to say what you've changed. People can see what you've done, and that was just a small change, so like it's fine. But if you're making substantial changes, it's helpful just to edit that little box that says update whatever your file name is. I would just change it to like add video credit or whatever, and then hit commit changes. I'm not shaming you, Kat.
No, you're absolutely right. I didn't even think for small changes. I don't usually do anything, but yes, you are right. It's because everything just looks like updated this file.
Right. If you're trying to hunt down like where something changed, it's helpful if they're kind of differentiated that way.
Yeah, like once I go ahead and update the cover image, I'll say updated cover image. Something like that. Apply suggestion. And then I had a comment up here. There was another comment that you gave me, I thought, that was, I just prefer use. Or maybe because I already applied that suggestion.
Yes, yeah. I think it just automatically resolves that whole conversation. But yeah,
okay.
Respond here.
Oh, best practice. I should have probably added you, or you'll get a notification.
Probably, but yeah, I do just try to get in the habit. Honestly, like if you and I are interacting on this merge request, I probably will get that. But yeah, you can always add it after the fact, and yeah, at that point you could probably resolve the thread as well, because like there isn't much more to that conversation.
Okay.
And resolving threads is handy. If you look up at the top of Chrissy's screen right now on sort of the right-hand side, you can see it's got the little green tick where it says 3 out of 3 threads resolved. That's really handy where if not all of the threads are resolved, you can't actually merge a merge request. And it's helpful because it's kind of like it's blocking you because it knows that maybe there's a change that was suggested or a query that was outstanding that hasn't been addressed. And so generally, like it's great. Now, if Chrissy hands this back over to me, all of the threads are resolved. There's nothing left to address. So generally, it's good practice as well, unless you have started a thread by leaving a comment or something that is there for someone else to take a look at. I think it's courteous to make sure that all of the threads are resolved before you hand it over to someone else, so that they know that it's like a clean slate and it's ready to go.
Well, and I especially like if there are a lot of changes, it helps me keep track of all the changes that needed to be made. So it's very satisfying after going through each comment, just doing resolve thread. And so that does help me keep things straight. So I've already submitted my commit, and then and then once it comes back, it's all good. I will reassign to you using the same process. So the in review and then a ping at the end.
Do you want to just go ahead and do that now? Obviously, for the purposes of time, we can't wait for this whole pipeline to pass, but let's assume that it does and everything looks good. Could you just assign that back to me, and then I'll take it over from there?
Yeah. Oh, let me do the reassign thing that you did. Because I have actually yet to do that. So what would be the best way for me to do that from here?
If you go back to the discussion tab, I think that's where you want to do it.
Okay.
And here you could actually show, once you reassign it to me, just go ahead and do that. And change the label as well. This is like getting very, very nitpicky, but it's just so that everyone knows kind of what the ideal workflow should be, and then you can decide from there what suits you. Scroll back up to my comment where I handed over to you.
Yes.
So there. Then yeah, this is how you start a thread of comments. So Chrissy could just leave a comment in the main comment box down at the bottom there, which would be absolutely fine as well. But this is another way of keeping the conversation all in one place. So it's helpful if you're talking about one thing to, you see what Chrissy did there, click on the little comment box on my comment, because that starts a thread where it keeps it all in one place. And you can also then resolve that as well. So it means that if there's outstanding stuff to be addressed, that's another thread. So now you can see, if you look up at the top there on the right, it says 3 out of 4 threads resolved. Chrissy just created another thread there. This isn't a great example of that because there isn't actually anything left to do. But if, for example, your response was, thanks for the changes, I'm not sure about, whatever, like maybe we need to push back the publish date to next week because of X reason. Like that's another conversation that kind of needs to be resolved before you can move forward. So that's where threading is really helpful, and I use that a lot. We are almost at time, and I think that is everything that I wanted to show. I'm just going to double check my list of things that we thought might be helpful to demo here. Leaving inline comments, threaded comments, resolving threads, suggested changes, accepting suggested changes, assigning and reassigning between the reviewer and the author, and updating the status label. Yeah, I think we're golden. Hopefully people found this helpful. We probably went too fast over some things and stuff. So if anything you want to see done kind of in more detail or at a slower pace, just hit up one of us, and we're happy to walk you through it. And thank you, Chrissy, for going on this journey with me.
My pleasure, as always.